How you doing, guys? Big Matt Danskell here again today, back once again with another episode of my Warhammer 40,000 Conquest series for you. Today, I'll be taking a look through the pages of issue 53. Before we go any further with the video, I just want to remind you to go check out Hobby Corner, or the Hobby Corner, for more Conquest related content. A lot of building and painting going on there, and I know there hopefully will be some Mortal Realms content soon as well, so if Age of Sigmar is your bag, definitely check that out. But back to the issue. So this week is issue 53, and let's start with the front cover as always. Oh, no! I always say something wrong. So let's start with what we get with the magazine, as I normally intend to. So it's a Space Marine bike this issue. It's £22.50 for 3 bikes. So the issue, the bike you get with this issue, the single bike you get with the issue, is worth about £7.50 if you were to just simply divide that by 3. So it's slightly under the price you pay for the magazine. However, you're getting 2 bikes with 1 issue, and then this 3rd bike with another issue. You can work it out a slightly different way, and then it works out slightly better for you. That over the course of the 2 issues, you're saving something like £7.52, I think. Anyway, onto the front cover, like I said initially. So we've got Space Marine bikes, white scars, and a Xenos Threat. Ooh, what is this Xenos Threat we see? Turning to the first page, though, we go to white scars first of all. It talks a little bit about the history of the white scars and about how they are a very loyal chapter of Space Marines. I would dispute that. On what I understand of the Horus Heresy, I've not read all the Horus Heresy books yet, but there were some white scars that fell during the Heresy, and so it wasn't an entirely complete loyal legion at the time of the Heresy. There were some scars that threw their lot in with the Sons of Horus and all the other traitor legions, and there were, I think it was a short story.
Classified records expunged.
There. I might edit that bit out, we'll see. Because I don't want to throw too many spoilers around, but there was some scars that fell anyway. But it talks about how they're bold warriors with a savage appearance. The white scars are feared across the galaxy. Also talks about how on their planet of Chigoris, it's a feral planet covered in windswept plains, very much like, where do we know there's a bit like that here on Earth? Mongolia, maybe? Yeah, so it's very similar, and goes on to talk about how the people of Chigoris are born in the saddle on the following page, and even once elevated to the ranks of the Adeptus Astartes, if you as an individual of Chigoris were chosen to join the ranks of the Adeptus Astartes, you're still expected to get in the saddle on a massive Space Marine bike. Now, these Space Marine bikes are about this big in terms of actual miniature size, so what's that, like 10 centimetres maybe? No, it's about, not even that, it's about 7.5 centimetres, about 3 inches. And yeah, they are not very big there, but if you actually scaled them up, they'd be massive. They'd be like the size of cars, easily. And the tyres are really wide, and it's crazy how they've got like Formula 1 width tyres, like the rear tyres on a Formula 1 car. But they're almost like truck size and stuff as well, so yeah, they're big, these bikes anyway, but the guys riding them are much bigger than normal humans anyway. They're around 8 to 10 feet taller Space Marine, and then you get Primaris Space Marines who are, I think they're supposed to be 8 to 10 feet tall as well, but obviously the miniatures are a lot bigger than Space Marine miniatures. I'm going off on a tangent, I'm going to get it back to the magazine now. Anyway, so yeah, there's first 2 pages dedicated to the white scars there, and then we've got a legacy of secrecy. What could this be? Dark Angels. So it talks about the legacy of secrecy of the Dark Angels. It talks about what they did during the Great Crusade, and when their planet, their Primarch was discovered on the planet of Caliban. He'd already set up, well, not set up, but he joined the ranks of a knightly order, and then gone on his own crusade on the planet to try and wipe out all these beasts of Caliban. Caliban was located, I think, near some kind of warp anomaly or warp rift, and it led to these massive beasts roaming the forests of Caliban, and there's Lionel Johnson, who is the Primarch of the Dark Angels, he was his birthing pod or incubation pod crashed on Caliban when it was cast out amongst the stars. All the Primarch's incubation pods were cast out amongst the stars. His landed on Caliban, and as like a 12-year-old boy, I think it was, he defeated this huge Calibanite lion. And it's basically, they call it a Calibanite lion, but whether it actually looks like an Earth lion, I'm not too sure. I don't think it does. It's more like a mutated form, something you'd see in the arenas in the Star Wars prequels. I can't remember which prequel specifically it was. Might be Attack of the Clones, but something more like that, more akin to that than something you'd necessarily see in a zoo on Terra on Earth. And then it goes on to talk about millennia 31 to 34, the Age of Warding. The Great Scouring, with the Emperor grievously wounded by Horus and confined to the Golden Throne. The armies of the Imperium strike back at the traitors. The Dark Angels Legion plays a significant role in these campaigns of vengeance. They drive out the forces of chaos from multiple systems and force them to retreat to the Eye of Terror. And then there's the fall of Caliban after that. So after the Horus Heresy is finished, and we're now in the Age of Warding, the fall of Caliban comes when the Dark Angel Legion returns to Caliban, or a big portion of the Dark Angel Legion returns to Caliban, expecting to finally get to put the feet up for a bit. But anything but happens when they arrive back on Caliban. There were certain sections of the Dark Angels and certain Dark Angel warriors, squads, chapters that were sent back to Caliban before the end of the Horus Heresy, before even the beginning of the Horus Heresy, and they were sent back. And they felt kind of shamed by the Primarch and shamed and betrayed. And then insidious forces got involved, and there was a rebellion on Caliban. So when the Dark Angels, the loyal Dark Angels, returned to Caliban, there was a massive war that went on, and it's cracked the planet into different sections. The biggest chunk of which is now known as the Rock, and that's where the Dark Angels Fortress Monastery is. It's like on a massive space, a massive chunk of rock in space, basically. On to the next page, we've got, what should I pick out here? Oh, the Red Wings of Redemption. Aided by the vast armies of the Rock, the Angels of Redemption restructure and re-equip their first and second companies, the Red Wings, their first and second companies, the Red Wings, in emulation of the Dark Angels, Deathwing and Ravenwing. The other successor chapters soon follow suit. So, first and second companies of most, if not all, Dark Angels companies are primarily Terminator companies, like the Deathwing. They wear like a bone white Terminator armour rather than the typical green you see on Dark Angels. And the second company are typically mounted on bikes like Ravenwing. One thing that I'm surprised they've not done in this magazine, being the magazine about space, or being one of the two magazines about Space Marine bikes, is talked more about the Ravenwing. They touch on it in here, I guess. I hadn't really thought of that when I read it earlier, but yeah, they do touch on it in here. They just don't go into much great detail about it. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the Dark Angels. There's a bit more getting closer to the 41st millennium. It gets all the way up to the 36th millennium, the Age of Foreboding, and after that it goes to Scout Bikes on the next page. So, Scout Bike Squads are fast-moving reconnaissance units that probe the length and breadth of the enemy positions, making sure their commanders have access to vital intelligence they need in order to command their troops to the best possible efforts. To the best possible effect. And then on to the next page, it talks more specifically about Space Marine bikes and how they perform a very vital role in communications and advanced scouting missions. They are Space Marine scouts after all. Laying booby traps on open areas of the battlefield, or even in terrain, heavy areas of the battlefield. But one thing that's interesting about Space Marine scout bikes rather than Space Marine bikes is that they can take shotguns as well, so they can get some of the normal scout weapons, shotguns or bolt pistols, but they also have the twin-mounted bolters on the front of the bike that the Space Marine bike has. I prefer the look slightly of the Space Marine scout bike over the Space Marine bike, but you know, each to their own, I guess. The White Scars it touches on in a little red box here as well. White Scars are renowned both for their mastery of mounted combat and their matchless skill as hunters and scouts. Their scout bikers are considered to be some of the best in the entire Imperium. On to the next page, the Xenos Threat. This is a page that talks about how various Xenos species, these next 2 pages, talks about how various Xenos species are a threat to mankind and how mankind has never got on with Xenos species really. When they set out on the original Age of Expansion, I think it was, they set out to conquer the galaxy. This was pre-Imperium, and humans started colonising worlds that aliens already existed on, so they just went to war with them and tried to wipe them out as best they could. After the same sort of thing happened during the Great Crusade, trying to wipe out orcs at Ullanor, and whenever they encountered Eldar, there were certain factions of the Imperium, the Emperor's Children, who tried to parley with various races like the Eldar, and it typically doesn't end very well for one reason or another. There's 3 races here picked out in picture form. The Drukhari are sadistic pirates, pitiless murderers who feed on pain and suffering. They literally feed and sustain themselves on the pain and suffering of others. It's one of the reasons they're so long-lived. They use almost like a sorcery, or I don't know how to describe it really. They basically, the screams of tortured victims feeds their souls and helps keep them alive longer than is natural for an Eldari. Or a Drukhari rather, an Eldar person. The Tyranids seek only to devour and ensure the survival of their own race. All of the races in the galaxy, or most of the races in the galaxy, are all just focused on keeping themselves alive. To one extent or another. There are, of course, Imperium factions that will parley and will trade with various alien species. There are always exceptions to the rule as well, like Jakero is an alien life form, but they are utilised by the Imperium. Inquisitors in particular like to use them. But going on to the next picture, the Eldari once ruled a vast empire only to fall due to their own depravity. That was when the fall of the Eldar happened and birthed the new Chaos God Slaanesh. Say new Chaos God, it was many years ago. I did cover it in one of the previous issues actually. There was a bit more detail on one of the pages. I think it was around Millennia 25, I can't remember for sure. On to the next page, we get Nurgle Demons, Horticulous Slimucks. Now this is a very stupidly named Nurgle Demon. He is the gardener of the Garden of Nurgle. So every garden needs a gardener, right? At least one. This is a particular fancy herald of Nurgle who has a very important job of gardening Nurgle's garden. So he prunes all the rotten plants when he thinks they need pruning, but he cultivates the garden and uses seeds from it and stuff to spread Nurgle's rot and is it fetid Nalmor trees? I can't remember what they're called, but the Nurgle trees, you can buy the scenery piece from Games Workshop. He spreads them throughout the Materium as well as the Immaterium where Nurgle's garden is located. He rides this giant snail thing. It looks kind of goofy. I say kind of goofy. There's no two ways about it. It looks very goofy. I think you can make it look less goofy than that personally, depending on how you paint it. But the way it's painted and stuff, it's supposed to look a bit goofy. Nurgle's always, not always, but often a bit goofy, a bit of a comedy Nurgle god, a bit of a comedy chaos god. More so than the other gods, really. The others take themselves very seriously, whereas Nurgle is all jolly and joyful, and he wants his followers and servants to be happy. So it's just a little more detail there about Horticulous Slimucks and his mount, Mulch. So, on to the next page, we get how to build Space Marine bikes. 2 pages of how to build Space Marine bikes. One thing I forgot to do was check if we had a how to build and a how to paint Space Marine bikes last time we got bikes. I feel like we did, in which case these pages aren't really necessary. However, I might be wrong. We might only just for the first time be getting how to build and paint Space Marine bikes. However, I'm pretty sure we've used the bikes in a battle report already. So, yeah, I'm pretty certain we've had how to build at least, and probably how to paint as well, Space Marine bikes. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages is probably a bit unnecessary. These 8 pages that have been taken up by the how to build and how to paint section. However, you get a nicely painted miniature at the end of it. That's a really good tabletop standard, I'd say, that we're getting up to now with the painting. It's going to be interesting to see how much further they take it by the 80th issue. And then onto the rules section. I was going to say the battle section, but it is the battle section as well, really. So a swift strike. Kalon echoes with the throaty roar of Space Marine vehicles and the guttural roar of demon engines. As infantry units clash across the front lines, these war machines dart through the lines, dealing death. This week's battle report is brought to you by Nurgle's Rot. And there's a Vox transmission coming in.
Brothers, to me, we must retrieve our banner. Our honour demands it.
I've just scratched my throat doing that. How silly of me. I'm going to end up coughing when I get to the next page now. So, that was Lieutenant Calcius just announcing to his Ultramarine Second Company brethren that they have lost their banner. Some silly buggers just left it on the battlefield, so they've got to go back and get it. There's 2 sides. There's 2 deployment zones here, rather than 2 sides. You'll notice in the middle of the battlefield, assuming I put it up behind me, there is a little red mark where the objective will be located. You can use one of the objective markers we've received in a previous issue, place that on the centre of the battlefield there, just on the roadway. The Space Marines deploying the blue deployment zone at one end of the battlefield. As always, it's blue. And the Death Guard in the green one at the other end of the battlefield. 6 inches to deploy your units, which is plenty, really, apart from if you've got hundreds and hundreds of miniatures like the Death Guard have. Now, they've not got hundreds, but they've got a lot more miniatures than the Space Marines anyway. They've got 3 command points to play with the Death Guard. Mephitic Blight Hull, a Foul Blight Spawn, Fetid Blow Drone, and Poxwalkers, 12 of them, and 10 Cultists. Space Marines get 3 command points, 3 Space Marine Bikes, Land Speeder, 5 Reavers, 5 Space Marine Scouts, and Lieutenant Calcius. It's a very, very fast force for the Space Marines. The only way they could have made it faster was perhaps if they took out Lieutenant Calcius, or took out the Reavers maybe, or the Space Marine Scouts, and replaced them with Aggressors. But we've only got 2 Aggressors at the minute, so that probably leave the sides a little bit unbalanced. So the Space Marines have got a good chance of getting to the objective before the Death Guard player. However, both players roll off. The winner can decide who deploys first. So, if you deploy first and you finish deploying first, which you will do if you deploy first, then it gives you a better chance as a Death Guard player if you deploy first. Because if you finish deploying first, you choose who takes the first turn. Let me just double check that for you. Players then alternate deploying their units, beginning with the player who chosen to deploy first. After all units have been deployed, the player who finished setting up their army first can choose to take the first or second turn. Yeah, so as a Death Guard player, really, you want to take the first turn to try and beat the Space Marine players to the objective. All is not lost if you don't beat them to the objective, as long as you catch them before they can run away with the objective and into a corner that you can't reach. Then, it's still all to play for. Victory conditions: eliminate enemy units. 1 victory point per enemy unit eliminated. Eliminate enemy warlord. 1 victory point. At the end of the battle, if a model from a player's army is carrying the banner, then the player gains 3 victory points. The game lasts 5 battle rounds. So in order to carry the banner, you place a single objective marker in the centre of the play area to represent the Ultramarines banner. An infantry model can carry the banner by moving into contact with it. The banner remains with the model until it is dropped, which only happens if the model is removed from play as a casualty. So, that's good at least for the Death Guard side. It's only infantry models that can pick up the banner. So it doesn't mean one of the Space Marine Bikes or Land Speeder can just nip in, get the banner, and get out of there into one of the far corners and just block the path with bodies. So it does make it slightly better than actually. When I initially read through this earlier today, I didn't notice that it says an infantry model can do it, only an infantry model. So yeah, that's a lot more balanced than I initially thought it was going to be. Onto the back page. I'm turning the magazine, but the back page is already fallen off. The back page, what do we get next week? We get Typhus. We get Typhus and his funny dancing pose. I might try and do a conversion on Typhus myself. I've seen some where he's holding up a Tau Fire Warrior. And I've recently come into possession of some Tau Fire Warriors, so I might try and do a similar conversion, but probably not with Fire Warrior, maybe with like just a spare cultist or something. Where he's holding him up by the throat and he's got his scythe in the other hand. And then the following week we get some Mechanicus Sector terrain. Your Mechanicus Sector expands the following week. Also featured in that magazine is the Alchemite Pipes. That's what we're getting with the issue. The Xenos Threat, Orcs, yes, and Demonic Incursions. So, I'll leave it there for now, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield.